Echoes of Time. Prologue. The rain fell in sheets across the weathered granite, droplets tracing the carved letters like tears. Amelia knelt before the headstone, her black umbrella doing little to shield her from the storm or her grief. She placed a single white lily among the sodden bouquets. "I found it," she whispered. "After all these years, I found your letter." Lightning split the sky, illuminating the date etched in stone. 20 years gone, yet the wound felt fresh as yesterday. Chapter 1, First Light. Boston, Massachusetts, Spring 2005. Amelia Chen had always believed in practical things, science, data, the tangible world beneath her fingertips. Romance was a chemical reaction, love a convenient evolutionary adaptation. At least, that's what she told herself as she hurried through the crowded subway station, late for her first day at Massachusetts General Hospital. Her phone buzzed with another message from her mother. "Remember, dinner with the Lius on Saturday. Their son is a surgeon now." She sighed, tucking the phone away without responding. At 26, with a newly minted MD and the pressure of her immigrant parents' expectations weighing on her shoulders, Amelia had mastered the art of deflection when it came to her mother's matchmaking attempts. The train jolted to a stop, throwing her off balance. Strong hands steadied her before she could stumble. "Careful there," a voice said, warm with amusement. She looked up into eyes the color of stormy seas, gray-blue and impossibly deep. The man attached to those eyes smiled, revealing a small dimple in his left cheek. "Thanks," she mumbled, embarrassed as she regained her footing. He wore faded jeans and a worn leather jacket, a canvas messenger bag slung across his broad shoulders. His dark hair curled slightly at the temples, just beginning to silver, though he couldn't have been more than 35. "No problem." His smile widened. "First day." She glanced down at her pristine white coat, hospital ID still shiny and new. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been there." He extended his hand. "Daniel Thorne. I'm in cardiology." "Amelia Chen. Internal medicine." She took his hand, surprised by the calluses on his palm. Not typical for a doctor. The train lurched forward, breaking their connection. As passengers shifted around them, Daniel reached into his bag, pulling out a battered paperback of Pablo Neruda's poetry. "Poetry before rounds?" she asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. "Best way to remember we're treating people, not just symptoms." He tapped the book. "Keeps the heart in medicine." The train announced their stop, Massachusetts General. "Well, doctor." "Chin," he said as they stepped onto the platform. "Perhaps I'll see you in a cafeteria. The coffee is terrible, but the company might make up for it." Before she could respond, he was gone, swallowed by the morning crowd of white coats and scrubs. Chapter 2, Intersections. 3 days passed before Amelia saw him again. 3 days of orientation, paperwork, and trying to look confident while feeling hopelessly lost in the hospital's labyrinthine corridors. It was just past midnight when she finally stumbled into the 24-hour cafeteria, desperate for caffeine after a particularly grueling shift. The space was nearly empty, save for a familiar figure hunched over a table in the corner, surrounded by patient charts. Daniel looked up as she approached, those remarkable eyes crinkling at the corners. "The new resident survives," he said. "How's your first week?" "Brutal," she admitted, collapsing into the chair across from him. "I think I've seen every bodily fluid possible in the last 72 hours. Ah, the glamorous life of a doctor." He pushed his coffee toward her. "Here. You need this more than I do." She hesitated only a moment before accepting. "Thanks. I owe you. Coffee tomorrow. Same time, same place." It wasn't a question, but his eyes held something tentative, almost vulnerable. Amelia should have said no. She had plans to review case studies, call her parents, maybe even sleep for once. Instead, she heard herself say, "It's a date." Daniel's smile faltered for just a moment. "Just coffee, doctor." "I don't date colleagues." Something like disappointment flickered through her. "Of course. Just coffee." Neither of them recognized it then, that moment when their paths had irrevocably tangled, setting them on a collision course with both love and tragedy. Some intersections, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. Chapter 3, Boundaries. Weeks passed, and just coffee became a lifeline. Midnight conversations about difficult cases evolved into discussions of books, music, philosophy. Daniel was unlike anyone Amelia had ever met, brilliant but unassuming, passionate about medicine, yet gentle with its limitations. "You never talk about yourself," she observed one night as they walked through the empty hospital garden, both too wired after a difficult code to sleep. "3 months of conversations, and I know your thoughts on everything from healthcare policy to whether pineapple belongs on pizza, which it absolutely does not, but nothing about your life outside these walls." Daniel's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Not much to tell. Work is my life. Family," she pressed. "None to speak of. You're lucky to have yours, even if your mother's matchmaking drives you crazy." She laughed. "The last guy she set me up with asked if I planned to quit medicine after having children. Within the first 5 minutes of dinner." "What did you tell him?" "That I plan to have my uterus bronzed and mounted on my office wall as a warning to others." Daniel's laughter echoed in the quiet garden. I would have paid to see his face. It was priceless. "My mother hasn't spoken to me directly in weeks." Their eyes met, and something shifted in the space between them, a current, electric and dangerous. Daniel looked away first. "We should head back," he said, his voice suddenly distant. "Early rounds tomorrow." Amelia watched him walk ahead, wondering what ghosts haunted the spaces he kept so carefully guarded. Chapter 4: Fault Lines. Summer faded into autumn, and autumn surrendered to winter. The hospital windows frosted over, and Boston disappeared under a blanket of snow. Amelia threw herself into her work, excelling in ways that surprised even her. If she occasionally caught Daniel watching her with something more than professional admiration, she pretended not to notice. It was the night of the hospital's holiday party when everything changed. Amelia, wearing a red dress that made her feel both powerful and vulnerable, found herself beside Daniel at the bar. "You look," he started, then stopped himself. "Different. Outside of scrubs." Good different or bad different? The champagne had made her brave. Dangerous different. Before she could decipher his meaning, a page came through, multiple casualties from a highway pileup. The ER needed all available hands. Hours later, blood-spattered and exhausted, they stood side by side in the quiet aftermath. They had lost 2 patients but saved 7. The emotional whiplash left them both raw. "I need air," Daniel said, his voice ragged. She followed him to the rooftop, where the December air bit at her skin. She'd lost her cardigan somewhere in the chaos of the night and shivered in her thin dress. Without a word, Daniel removed his suit jacket and placed it around her shoulders. His hands lingered, and when she looked up, the walls he'd built so carefully had crumbled. "Amelia," he whispered, her name a prayer on his lips. "Don't tell me we can't," she said, stepping closer. "Not tonight." His kiss tasted of coffee and mint and desperation, like a man drowning who had finally found air. She melted into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers, his heartbeat thundering beneath her palms. When he pulled away, his eyes held a storm of emotions. "There are things you don't know about me." "Then tell me." He shook his head. "If I did, this, whatever this is, would be over before it began. Let me decide that." "I can't." His voice broke. "I won't risk losing you completely." She should have pressed harder, should have demanded the truth. Instead, she kissed him again, sealing their fate with a touch. Some decisions, made in moments of vulnerability, echo through lifetimes. This was one of them. Chapter 5: Half-Truths. Their relationship existed in stolen moments, hurried kisses in empty on-call rooms, whispered conversations in the dark hours before dawn, weekend escapes to a cabin Daniel kept in the Berkshires. For 6 blissful months, Amelia allowed herself to believe it was enough. It was during one such weekend that she first noticed the medication. Daniel had gone for firewood, and Amelia, searching for extra blankets, opened his nightstand drawer. Among the expected items, reading glasses, chapstick, a dog-eared novel, sat an unmarked prescription bottle. Medical curiosity got the better of her. She opened it to find pills she immediately recognized, high-dose immunosuppressants. When Daniel returned, arms laden with wood, he found her sitting on the bed, the bottle in her hand. "Were you going to tell me?" she asked quietly. He set the wood down carefully, movements deliberate. Eventually, "What is it?" "Cancer. Autoimmune disease?" He sat beside her, taking the bottle and returning it to the drawer. "Heart transplant. 8 years ago." The words hit her like physical blows. 8 years? And you're a cardiologist. Poetic, isn't it? His smile held no humor. I specialize in the very thing that failed me. Why keep it secret? Especially from me. He took her hands, his touch gentle as always. When people know, everything changes. I become a case study, a walking miracle, a cautionary tale. Never just Daniel. I'm not people, she whispered, hurt coloring her voice. No, you're not. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You're the woman I'm falling in love with, and I was afraid. Of what? That you'd see me differently. That you'd start counting the years I might have left instead of the moments we have now. Transplant patients had improved survival rates these days, but the shadow of rejection always loomed. The average heart lasted 15 years. 8 had already passed. How long have the doctors given you? Doctors give estimates, not guarantees, he said, evading the question. I'm healthy now. My numbers are good. She knew he was withholding something, but she was too afraid to push. Instead, she leaned into him, resting her head against his chest, listening to the borrowed heart that kept him alive, the heart she realized, with sudden clarity, she couldn't bear to lose. No more secrets, she murmured against his skin. No more secrets, he agreed, but his eyes didn't quite meet hers. Chapter 6 Promises. Spring arrived with a riot of color and an unexpected proposal. Not of marriage, Daniel was too practical for that, but of a life together. A brownstone in Beacon Hill, with bay windows and a garden terrace. A home? Are you sure? Amelia asked, hardly daring to believe. What about your rule about colleagues? They sat in their favorite cafe, morning light spilling across the table between them. Daniel reached for her hand, tracing the lines of her palm. Some rules are made to be broken, he said. And we're hardly just colleagues anymore. She studied him, the silver at his temples more pronounced now, the fine lines around his eyes deeper than when they'd met. But those eyes still held the same intensity, the same depth that had captivated her that first day on the subway. What about your prognosis? She asked, the question she'd been avoiding for months. His hand stilled. What about it? Daniel, I'm a doctor too. I know the statistics. I know you're hiding something. He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he sighed. My last biopsy showed early signs of rejection. They're adjusting my medications, but, best case scenario, 5 more years with this heart. Maybe less. The cafe continued its morning bustle around them, but Amelia heard nothing but the roaring in her ears. 5 years. 60 months. 1,825 days. Not enough. Never enough. There are other options, she said, medical training kicking in. Another transplant. At my age, with a history of rejection, I'd be at the bottom of any list. He squeezed her hand. This is why I didn't tell you. I don't want you counting down days. I want you living them with me. Then we'll live them, she said fiercely. All of them. Together. Later that night, tangled in sheets in each other, Amelia made him promise something. If things get bad, she whispered, if you start to decline, promise you'll tell me. No heroic stoicism, no protecting me from the truth. Promise me. In the darkness, Daniel's fingers traced the curve of her cheek. I promise. Some promises, even made with the best intentions, are impossible to keep. Chapter 7 Borrowed Time. For 3 years, they built a life in stolen time. The brownstone became home, filled with books and music and laughter. They worked different shifts at the hospital now. Amelia as an attending physician, Daniel reducing his hours as his health permitted. They traveled when they could, collecting experiences like treasures, sunset over the Grand Canyon, midnight in Paris, cherry blossoms in Kyoto. Amelia learned to read the signs. The subtle shortness of breath Daniel tried to hide, the days when fatigue pressed him into silence, the increasing frequency of his medication adjustments. She kept meticulous private notes, tracking patterns, searching medical journals for experimental treatments. It was a crisp October morning when she found him in the bathroom, gripping the sink, lips tinged blue. Hospital, she said, no room for argument. No. The admission lasted 2 weeks. Daniel's body was rejecting his heart more aggressively now, his immune system waging war against the organ that had sustained him for 11 years. Doctor. Eleanor Winters, the transplant specialist, delivered the news Amelia had been dreading. We've exhausted our medical options, Daniel. It's time to list you for another transplant. No, Daniel said, his voice weak but determined. Daniel, Amelia began. The odds are against me, he interrupted. You know as well as I do what the success rates are for second transplants. But there's a chance, Amelia insisted. A small one at enormous cost. He looked at Dr. Winters. What kind of quality of life are we talking about? Honestly, the specialist's expression softened with compassion. Even with a successful second transplant, you'd face significant challenges. Extended hospitalization, increased risk of infection, higher rejection rates. The immunosuppression would be more aggressive, with all the accompanying side effects. And realistically, how long would I wait for a match? Given your blood type and antibody profile, a year minimum. Possibly longer. A year he might not have. I want to go home, Daniel said quietly. Whatever time I have left, I want to spend it at home. That night, after they'd settled back into their brownstone, Amelia sat beside him on their bed, clutching a folder of research papers. There's a trial at Johns Hopkins, she said, desperation edging her voice. Experimental immunotherapy that's shown promising results in cases like yours. Daniel took the folder gently from her hands and set it aside. Amelia stopped. I can't, she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. I can't just watch you die. I'm not asking you to. He wiped her tears with trembling fingers. I'm asking you to help me live, truly live, for whatever time remains. That's not fair. None of this is fair. He pulled her close, his heartbeat uneven against her ear. But it's our reality. In the quiet of their bedroom, they made a new plan, not for fighting death, but for embracing life in its shadow. Chapter A. The Letter. Winter descended early that year, bringing with it a peaceful resignation. Daniel's condition stabilized temporarily with adjusted medications, giving them a respite neither had dared hope for. They spent Thanksgiving with Amelia's family, who had come to love Daniel as their own. Her mother, who had once envisioned a very different future for her daughter, held Daniel's hand throughout dinner, as if by holding on, she could keep him tethered to this world. December brought a series of small celebrations, each day marked as precious, each moment cataloged in Amelia's memory. They hosted a Christmas party for their hospital colleagues, Daniel insisting on cooking despite his weakened state. He moved more slowly now, resting often, but his eyes still sparked with the same intelligence and warmth. It was the day after Christmas when Amelia found him in his study, writing. What's that? She asked, setting down a cup of tea beside him. He covered the page with his hand. Nothing important. Daniel, we agreed. No secrets. He hesitated, then relented. It's a letter. For you, but not for now. For when? For after. He met her gaze steadily. When you're ready. She wanted to argue, to insist there would be no after, but the words died in her throat. Instead, she kissed his forehead and left him to his writing, her heart breaking silently with each step away from the study. That night, as they lay together watching the snow fall outside their window, Daniel made an unexpected request. Marry me, he whispered against her hair. Amelia shifted to look at him, searching his face. What happened to marriage is just a piece of paper. Maybe I was wrong. His smile was tender. Maybe some pieces of paper matter after all. They were married on New Year's Eve in the hospital chapel, a small ceremony with only their closest friends and Amelia's parents as witnesses. Daniel stood without assistance, his determination overriding his body's weakness for this one crucial hour. Amelia wore blue, the color of your eyes when we first met, she told him, and carried white lilies. Their vows were simple, unadorned by the usual promises of decades together. Instead, they pledged presence, honesty, and love without conditions or time frames. I choose you, Daniel said, his voice steady despite his pallor, for all my days. And I choose you, Amelia replied, for all of mine. Later, as the new year approached, they stood on their terrace watching fireworks bloom across the Boston skyline. Daniel leaned heavily against the railing, his breathing labored despite the oxygen cannula he now needed constantly. No regrets, he asked, studying her profile in the intermittent light. Just one, she said softly, that we didn't have more time. He turned her to face him, framing her face with his hands. Time is a construct, Dr. Chen. What matters is what we build within it. As midnight struck, he kissed her with surprising strength, as if pouring every remaining ounce of his life force into this one moment of connection. "Happy New Year," he whispered against her lips. "Happy new beginning." She didn't understand then what he meant. She would later, when it was too late. Chapter 9. Last Breaths. January brought a blizzard that buried Boston under 3 feet of snow, transforming their terrace into a pristine white canvas. Daniel's condition deteriorated rapidly after their wedding, as if his body, having completed its final mission, could now surrender to its inevitable failure. Hospice nurses came daily, adjusting medications, offering what comfort they could. Amelia took leave from the hospital, unwilling to miss a single precious moment. They spent hours in quiet conversation, revisiting memories, reading poetry aloud. Daniel insisted she continue her research, watching with pride as she outlined a promising study on early detection of transplant rejection. "You'll change lives," he told her, bittersweet smile playing at his lips. "That's your gift to the world." "Our gift," she corrected. "Everything I know about the heart, I learned from you." On a clear, cold morning in late January, Daniel asked to be moved to the bay window overlooking the garden. The sun streamed through the glass, painting gold across his too thin face. Amelia sat beside him, their fingers intertwined. "I hid it," he said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hid what?" "The letter. For when you're ready." His breathing had become shallow, each word an effort. "But not too soon. Promise me." "Daniel." "Promise," he insisted, a flash of his old strength surfacing. "You need to grieve properly first. No shortcuts." She nodded, tears streaming unchecked down her face. "I promise." He smiled then, the special smile that had always been hers alone. "I loved you from that first day on the subway, before I even knew your name." "I know," she said, though she hadn't, not really. "I loved you too. Remember that," he murmured, his eyelids growing heavy. "When it gets dark, remember that." She held him as his breathing slowed, each exhale longer than the last. The winter sun continued its arc across the sky, indifferent to the human drama unfolding beneath its gaze. When the final breath came, so quietly she almost missed it, Amelia felt something fundamental shift in the universe, as if gravity itself had altered. Daniel Thorne was gone, taking with him the heart that had loved her completely, if not long enough. Chapter 10. Aftermath. Grief, Amelia discovered, was not a linear journey but a labyrinth of unexpected turns. Some days she functioned almost normally, returning to work, engaging with patients, even occasionally laughing at a colleague's joke. Other days, she could barely rise from bed, crushed under the weight of Daniel's absence. Spring arrived, melting the snow and revealing the first green shoots in their garden. Amelia planted the lilies Daniel had ordered before his death, following the meticulous instructions he'd left. Each bulb felt like a promise to the future he wouldn't see. She didn't search for the letter. Not yet. Some days she convinced herself it didn't exist, that it had been a delusion of his failing mind. Other days, she felt its presence everywhere, hidden somewhere in the home they'd made together. Summer came, bringing with it the first anniversary of the day they decided to move in together. Amelia found herself in Daniel's study, a room she'd largely avoided since his death. His medical journals still lined the shelves, his reading glasses still perched on the desk as if waiting for his return. She sat in his chair, running her fingers over the worn leather armrests. How many hours had he spent here, researching treatments that might extend his time with her? How many nights had he worked here while she slept, determined to make every contribution he could in the time he had left? On impulse, she opened the desk drawer and froze. There, nestled among paper clips and sticky notes, lay a small wooden box she'd never seen before. Her hands trembled as she lifted it, finding it surprisingly heavy for its size. Inside was an envelope with her name written in Daniel's distinctive script and a smaller velvet pouch. She opened the pouch first, tipping its contents into her palm, a delicate gold pendant in the shape of an anatomically correct heart, inlaid with a tiny diamond. The note accompanying it was brief, for the doctor who truly understands hearts. "Wear it close to yours." Tears blurred her vision as she fastened the necklace around her throat. Only then did she turn to the envelope, not the letter she knew instinctively, but something else. Inside was a set of coordinates and a key. Chapter 11. Pilgrimage. The coordinates led to a remote cabin in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, a place Daniel had never mentioned. The drive took nearly 3 hours, winding through increasingly isolated terrain until Amelia found herself on a narrow dirt road leading to a small wooden structure nestled among towering pines. The key fit perfectly in the rustic door. Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable. A single room with a fireplace, a small kitchen, and a bed beneath a window overlooking a pristine lake. It showed signs of care but not recent habitation. A layer of dust covered the surfaces. On the mantelpiece sat a framed photograph she'd never seen. Daniel as a young man, perhaps 20, standing beside an older man with the same storm-gray eyes. Both wore fishing gear and identical grins, holding up an impressive catch. "Your father," Amelia whispered, recognizing the resemblance. Daniel had rarely spoken of his parents, saying only that they died when he was in medical school. A weathered journal lay beside the photograph. Opening it revealed Daniel's handwriting, dating back 15 years, long before she'd known him. The entries detailed his connection to this place. The cabin had belonged to his father, who had taught him to fish in the lake and hunt in the surrounding woods. After his parents' deaths in a car accident, Daniel had kept the cabin but rarely visited, the memories too painful. The final entry was dated just 2 months before his death. "Brought the papers to transfer ownership today. This place deserves more life than I've given it. We'll know what to do when she's ready. The letter is where Dad taught me to find treasure, beneath the stars but above the earth." Amelia read the cryptic words again, trying to decipher their meaning. She spent hours searching the cabin, looking under floorboards and inside hollow books. As evening approached, she stepped outside, frustrated and exhausted. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, reflecting on the lake's surface like a living canvas. Daniel had seen this view, had loved it enough to preserve it for her. She sat on the wooden dock, dangling her feet above the water, and watched as the first stars appeared. Stars. Beneath the stars, but above the earth. She looked up at the cabin's roof, then at the small ladder attached to its side. Heart pounding, she climbed carefully, pulling herself onto the gently sloped surface. There, in a small waterproof box secured to the chimney, she found it, a thick envelope bearing her name and the instruction, "When you're ready." Not before. Amelia climbed down with trembling hands, the letter clutched to her chest. Inside the cabin, she lit the fireplace against the mountain chill and curled into the bed that still somehow held echoes of Daniel. Was she ready? Would she ever be? The pendant rested warm against her skin, a tangible reminder of the heart she'd lost. With a deep breath, she broke the seal. Chapter 12, Revelation. Daniel's letter began simply. "My dearest Amelia, if you're reading this, you found your way to the cabin, which means you've begun to find your way forward. I'm proud of you for that first step. I've written and rewritten this letter a dozen times, struggling to find the right words. How do you condense a lifetime of love into ink and paper? How do you say goodbye when all you want is more time? I won't waste what pages I have on regrets or sorrows. Instead, I want to tell you a story, our story, but from a different angle than you know." What followed was a narrative that shook Amelia to her core. Daniel revealed that their first meeting on the subway hadn't been coincidence at all. He had seen her weeks earlier, presenting a case during grand rounds while he was consulting at Mass General. He'd been captivated by her brilliance, her compassion, her unwillingness to give up on a patient others had deemed hopeless. When he'd learned she would be joining the staff, he'd arranged to be on that particular train, at that particular time, having studied her schedule. The stumble, the steadying hand, all orchestrated to create a moment of connection. "I know how this sounds," he wrote, "perhaps even disturbing. But I was running out of time even then, and the thought of not knowing you seemed unbearable. I never expected you to love me back. I only wanted the chance to be near your life for whatever time I had left." The letter continued, revealing other secrets, how he turned down an experimental treatment 3 years into their relationship because it would have required relocating to Switzerland for a year, how he'd known the second transplant was an option earlier than he'd admitted, how he'd made arrangements for her career advancement through colleagues who owed him favors, ensuring she would have professional support after he was gone. "I manipulated circumstances, Amelia, but never your feelings. Every moment between us was real, the most real thing I've ever known." Tears splashed onto the pages as Amelia read, smudging the ink but not the truth they contained. The final paragraphs held the most difficult revelation of all. "There's one last thing you should know. The night before our wedding, I received a call. A heart had become available, a potential match with promising compatibility markers. I declined without telling you. Before you rage at me, and you have every right, understand this. The surgery would have given me perhaps another year, but that year would have been spent in recovery and hospitals in pain. I chose instead 6 months of clear-minded time with you, 6 months of memories unmarred by surgical scars and hospital walls. It was my heart, my choice. I don't regret it. Now for the most important part of this letter. I release you, Amelia. From grief, from guilt, from the shadow of what might have been. Your heart is too magnificent to spend its beats in mourning. Love again. It may seem impossible now, but time will open that door. Remember me, but don't live for my memory. Live for yourself, for the brilliant doctor, the compassionate healer, the fierce woman I was privileged to love. All my love, for all my days and beyond, Daniel. P.S. The cabin is yours now, legally and spiritually. Come here when you need peace, when you need to remember, or when you need to forget. The sunrise over the lake heals all wounds, given time. Amelia read the letter 3 times before setting it aside. Outside, the moon cast silver light across the lake, creating a pathway that seemed to lead to infinity. She stepped onto the dock, the wooden planks cool beneath her bare feet. Daniel had orchestrated their meeting, had shaped their time together through choices she hadn't known existed. Should she feel manipulated? Betrayed? Perhaps. Yet all she felt was a profound gratitude that he had fought so hard to create the love they'd shared, even knowing its inevitable end. She touched the heart pendant at her throat, feeling its delicate edges against her fingertips. He had given her a borrowed heart in more ways than one. Borrowed time, borrowed happiness, borrowed future. Yet what they'd built in that borrowed time was more authentic than many find in decades. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the world in gentle pinks and golds, Amelia made a decision. She would return to Boston, to their brownstone, to her research. She would complete the study Daniel had encouraged, perhaps saving other hearts from the fate of his. She would honor his memory not through endless grief, but through purpose. And someday, when the time was right, she would return to this cabin by the lake, not to mourn what she had lost, but to celebrate what she had found. Epilogue, 20 years later. The rain had stopped by the time Amelia finished her vigil at Daniel's grave. 20 years to the day since his heart had beaten its last rhythm against her ear. She was different now, silver threading through her dark hair, fine lines mapping the journeys of 2 decades without him. She'd kept her promise, living fully rather than merely surviving. Her research had revolutionized transplant rejection protocols, saving countless lives. She'd mentored young doctors, traveled to places she and Daniel had dreamed of seeing together, even loved again, though differently, gradually, with a gentleness that respected what had come before. Throughout it all, she'd worn his heart pendant, a constant reminder of the man who had taught her that time, while finite, need not limit love. As she walked away from the cemetery, her phone chimed with a message from her research team. Another successful trial, another milestone reached. Life continuing its persistent forward motion. At home, still the brownstone they'd shared, though renovated and reimagined over the years. She opened the carved wooden box where she kept his letter. The paper had yellowed slightly, the ink faded in places, but the words remained as powerful as the day she'd first read them. Remember me, but don't live for my memory. Live for yourself. She had. She did. She would. Outside her window, spring unfurled in a riot of green, promising another season of growth, of change, of possibility. Amelia touched the pendant at her throat and smiled. Some hearts, though physically temporary, leave echoes that resonate through time, influencing lives they never touch directly, creating ripples that extend far beyond their brief existence. Daniel's heart had been such a one, and hers, forever changed by loving him, would continue its work, beating strong, loving deeply, and embracing the beautiful impermanence of it all. Then,